welcome back to this episode of Outside the Arena. I'm Griffin Senek alongside my co-host Devin Bernstein. Finally back. I know it's been a few weeks. Hopefully, I know we said it last time, but hopefully some more consistency starting now. Lot to catch up on. Mostly going to be NBA today. Obviously, free agency just started last night. The draft happened, this week as well. So a lot to touch on there. The Celtics obviously won the championship. We're not really going to get too much into that series. I mean, there's not much to talk about. It was an ass whooping. I'd like to say our last episode, I did say, I think you were underestimating the Celtics. I was right. Maybe I'm the NBA sharp on this podcast. Who knows here. But congrats to the Celtics, obviously. Congrats to the Florida Panthers as well. That was a hell of a Stanley Cup finals and playoffs as a whole. NHL free agency has also been going crazy right now, but we're going to focus on the NBA. And I think we'll start things off with your Philadelphia 76ers, Dev. Big, first 24 hours, they get the maxi extension done. Paul George signs a 4-year max contract, also reached deals with Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, Kelly Oubre. So this team starting to take shape a little bit now. Your thoughts, I know I feel like we'd kind of talked and seeing the way that some of these NBA teams have built, we are unsure if Philly should just go for depth or go for a superstar. And, obviously it seems like they chose the route of a superstar with Paul George.
Yeah, there's a lot here. I guess just going through like how I was feeling about this, I was a little worried when the first signing was Drummond, and then I kind of convinced myself I was going to stay up because, it would be signed late in the evening, and then Kelly Oubre gets signed, and I'm sort of like, uh-oh, what's going on here? And I basically gave up. I was about to go to bed. I checked the Twitter notifications for one last time, and Paul George has signed on a 4-year max deal. The first thing I'll say here is like everyone is going to rush to be like, well, you're going to be paying him $55 million, when he's 36, 37. It's like, this is kind of the price of doing business in the NBA right now. First of all, like the cap has just gone up so much in the last 8 to 10 years that the amount of money that seems insane isn't insane necessarily. Like this isn't, if Paul George were on a team his whole career and signed a supermax with them after, making an all NBA team, he'd be making like $70 million a year, like the Jaylen Brown contract is. So it's like, obviously, I don't think he'll be worth this once, he's 36, 37, necessarily. Will he be a bad player? I don't think so. This is a 6'9" wing who's one of the best off-ball shooters in the league, has incredible feel for the game, and has good defensive IQ and hands. Like, I don't see any way where this guy isn't like, I guess, some version of an elite role player at the very least, unless he just completely, kind of dogs it. But again, that's not really what this signing is about. It's really about trying to maximize these next 2 or 3 years. Unfortunately, I don't have the confidence that Embiid will age, as well as some of the modern superstars we've seen today. Steph's still going strong, 36, turning 37 this year. Obviously, LeBron turning 40 soon. Suns in the damn league. I don't think that's going to happen with Embiid, but I think there is a need to kind of push the chips into the center of the table here, and I think Paul George is really a perfect fit. I think you watch that Knicks series, and I think this team really needed one more knockdown shooter, one more guy who could create a shot, some more size, and some toughness. And I don't think Paul George is I don't think Paul George can be the full-time 4 for this team. I'll say that. But, finding a Dorian Finney-Smith on the trade market or Grant Williams on the trade market, like not these spectacular pieces, but I think those guys can fill in the, 25, 28 minutes a game you need from the forward position. I was, talking about this off air last night, I guess. That type of guy can do wonders for a team, like, especially in the East. You got Giannis, you have big wings all over the league right now. If you have a big physical forward who can help stop them, and then also, help, this is such a cliche thing, but like you watch the physicality of that Knicks series, like, and I've said it before, like Embiid was really the only one that was able to really play as physically as the Knicks wanted to. Maxi's like a 6'2" guard, and everyone else is, not really a super physical player. So I do think that's still a need for this team. But they found shooting in the draft between McCain, and then they signed Eric Gordon last night. Everyone, all the Sixers fans, and this is true, by the way, think Morey is very obsessed with the former Rockets. 100%
Oh
true.
yeah, loves them.
But Eric Gordon is still like a very good shooter, has a good body for a guard. Like I don't understand why people are freaking out about this guy as like a 20-minute a game minimum guy. Oubre, I mean, I certainly had my doubts of, but with what he showed defensively in that Knicks series, I think this is actually kind of a bargain contract for about $8 million a year. Drummond, good backup big. When Embiid misses, hopefully it's just a week or two, but we know Embiid will miss some time at some point, and Drummond is the starting center for 4 or 5 games. That could be frustrating, but how many centers in the league are you going to be able to get behind Embiid that are going to, completely keep the ship going for a long period of time? I just don't think that's realistic, especially if you want to build out a roster that can play with Embiid well. So ultimately, I really like what the Sixers have done here. Would I pick them over the Celtics? No. Would I pick them over the Knicks? Maybe even not. We'll talk about the Bridges trade in a few minutes, obviously, here, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, I think this is the type of move the Sixers kind of not punted last year, but didn't go all in last year because of. And I think not having to trade all of your assets for a Paul George and just signing him into cap space isn't something we've seen in a while. Like, I guess since, that free agency where Kevin Durant and Kyrie went to the Nets and Kawhi and Paul George went to the Clippers, like there hasn't really been that caliber of player to sign with another team as a free agent, really. Partially because, the cap space and whatever, but it's just rare in the modern NBA you're getting that big of an asset to your team without trading picks or young players or whatever. So I think that's also something of value here.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, looking at the way that the Knicks have attacked things, and obviously the Celtics are loaded, and they just extended Derek White today as well. Like the Sixers had to go for, I think that it was kind of decided for them that they needed a move like this because, just making some of those depth moves probably wasn't going to cut it based on what we've seen, from them and from the team the past few years. So I think it's a good move. Obviously, like you said, like the money, like, yeah, there's going to be years where you're like, Jesus, like we got to pay this guy that much money. He's taking up, X amount of our cap space, but it's what you do. And, obviously, Joel Embiid is only going to be in his prime for so long. Like you're probably looking at like 3-4 more years, maybe if that, of like the level of production he's at, which is just like, hard to fathom almost. So I like the move. I mean, it's going to be interesting we've seen with kind of all these big threes, how Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George play together. Obviously, it seems like a lot of these, big threes we've seen in recent years haven't necessarily panned out. You look at the Suns, for example, last year acquiring Bradley Beal and, 3 elite scorers, and it just didn't click whatsoever. I think it's a different situation, obviously, with Embiid, forcing the ball into the paint a little more with him. But it will be interesting. I think it is always interesting with these big threes. And obviously when Harden was there, he's obviously more of a facilitator, a passer, which, Paul George necessarily isn't. So how does that play into, Maxey? Does he kind of have to become more of a floor general type player? That's obviously yet to be seen because, they really, I guess, I don't know. Like I saw a mock starting lineup today with like, Maxey at the 1, Eric Gordon, and it's like I just don't know who is going to be like that facilitator. It's going to be interesting. I think Maxey can step up, no doubt. Or yeah, obviously Embiid himself kind of facilitates things, so that'll be interesting. But I think it's a good move for them. I mean, Paul George, still a great player, all-star level caliber player. So getting him in free agency, like you said, not having to give up any assets, I think it's a good move. And, for Philly, I think, they're right back up there now. Whereas last year, kind of, like you said, felt like a year off almost, where it's like, yeah, they'll make the playoffs, but they're really not going to do anything in the playoffs where, now it's, right back to the goal of winning a championship. And I think Sixers fans would agree that nothing less is a success, maybe making the finals just since they haven't done that with Embiid. But still, I mean, I think it's championship or bust the way these recent years have gone. But I like the Paul George move, and I think Andre Drummond I think is a solid backup center. Eric Gordon, Kelly Oubre, like solid depth pieces for what they're able to kind of afford. Obviously, the dream would be to get some maybe more. I don't even know who would fit that mold. But for the price they're paying those guys, it's not bad. And, having a veteran locker room, I don't think can hurt you. So good moves all around. I think the Sixers have pushed themselves right back into the conversation for, the top of the East. So although I agree, I don't think they're quite at the Celtics. And if I had to say right now between them and the Knicks, I'd probably pick the Knicks after the McCall trade, which I guess we can transition to. Knicks they complete the Villanova Knicks acquiring McCall Bridges for, I think it was 4 first round picks, Bogdanovich, and like some pick swaps. So a big haul, but Bridges obviously, one of the elite defensive players in the league. Can obviously score the basketball. We saw that the year he was traded to Brooklyn, I think he averaged like 25, 26 points in his games there. So proven scorer. The Knicks also re-upped Anunoby. They lost Isaiah Hartenstein today to the Oklahoma City Thunder, which the Thunder have been making some great moves as well with Hartenstein and Caruso. But with the Knicks, Dev, your thoughts on the trade for Bridges and, kind of how this roster has panned out? Because it really feels like, obviously you've got Brunson there, but this supporting cast around him is, up there with the best in the NBA, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Bridges and Anunoby on the wing is going to be an absolute nightmare to face. DiVincenzo and Hart didn't come out of the playoffs last year basically until their bodies gave up on them, and now they're going to be coming off the bench in theory. You still have Deuce McBride. He gave you some really solid minutes. Even he had some, crazy playoff minute games, and he's going to be the 8th or 9th guy here. In a bucket, in a vacuum, they did overpay. But I mean, I think the Knicks are young enough and they kind of have this core together and they have the chemistry and, they're healthy. I don't think any of these guys are really going to have super injury prone seasons. Maybe Anunoby has struggled with that, but Bridges is an absolute Iron Man. And, the guys that were on this team this year have generally stayed pretty healthy. So in terms of that, I think they're going to be really good for the next 5 or 6 years. So I'm not worried about the picks really. In terms of they're gonna cough up the 3rd overall pick, but if they need to make another move, particularly if Randall isn't working out, they're not really gonna have the picks to attach there and get someone back that's better. So I think that's the thing here. This is my overall takeaway from this move is that this is now, I think Shaq said earlier last season that Tobias Harris potentially in your hands as a 3rd option, and that was kind of crazy to say, but I really kind of think this is the case for Randall here, because I think Brunson is completely capable of having one of these scorched earth playoff runs like he's basically showed us the last 2 years. I think Bridges and Anunoby will give you an efficient 14-15 a night, and obviously the great defense. Bridges wasn't incredible as a scorer last year, but he was the first option playing with, Spencer Dinwiddie as his point guard. And, I have nothing against Bridges, but I don't think anyone sees that guy and thinks he's a number 1 on a really good team. And that's not what he is now. He's really at the absolute most the 2nd, but really more like the 3rd or 4th piece. And then, like I said, you have 3 really elite role players coming off your bench now in McBride, DiVincenzo, and Hart. Those guys are all locked up long-term on really awesome contracts. So again, if Mitchell Robinson can stay healthy here, I really do think a lot of the pressure is on Randall. And as much as Randall's had his shortcomings and all that, I think we do have to recognize that the Knicks are probably nowhere near where they are right now, if not for what Randall did in the 2020 season, especially. I mean, everyone freaked out, they didn't sign KD and Kyrie and draft Zion, everyone, kind of thought around that time, but, and then, everyone joked they came away with 6 power forwards or whatever it was that offseason. And, all that was true, but, Julius Randle made them a competent team over time. And that ended up, obviously being huge for them to be a respected organization. Yeah. And then my last real concern here is they let Hartenstein go. The way the CBA works, I'm not going to try to delve into it super deeply, but when you trade for someone who's making more money than you gave out, you're hard capped at the first apron, which means they basically couldn't have afforded, they couldn't have gotten close to what Hartenstein was offered. So I don't really think they could have done much there, but at the same time, Mitchell Robinson staying healthy for 70 plus games a year and a whole playoff run and playing, Tibbs minutes, because I don't know who their backup center is going to be, but it's not going to be as good as Hartenstein, unless they hit it out of the park again, I guess. But my guess would be it's more of a, 10-15 minute a game guy that you don't want to play for super long. And as we know, Tibbs isn't one to, experiment with these small lineups, which I think they really could do if they wanted to with, Randall, Hart, Bridges, Anunoby, and Brunson, something like that, because, you have great rebounding, you have the defense, you have everything you need really, besides a true rim protector. But Tibbs does really value that, which is fair. He's a defensive coach, whatever. So I think that's one question. They don't really have another contract, and maybe they have a couple picks they could move, but I don't see them acquiring a really good center here. So I could see that being an issue, but I think the Knicks are just about as well built out of a team as you can ask for. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see. I want to see Julius Randle prove everyone wrong. I mean, I think he's a good guy, and I think everyone kind of blames him, sort of rightfully so, for the 2 playoff runs he's come up short in. But he also wasn't healthy this year. He hasn't played in the playoffs really in 2 years as a fully healthy guy. So I think there is some potential that Randall, kind of just had 2 tough playoff runs. He hadn't played in the playoffs before really. So certainly not writing him off, but that would be my big, swing piece here is how does Randall fare in the playoffs?
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. And, I think you look at how they're matched up with the Celtics. I mean, it's going to be, very fun to watch those teams compete. And I think the one red flag, like you bring up, like the center position, Kristaps is someone who kind of killed the Knicks a little bit, and obviously is such a huge piece for Boston. And then obviously you've got Embiid with the Sixers, and if they do get out of the East in the playoffs, which obviously is a ways away from now, but you potentially run into someone like Jokic over there, which not be a good matchup as well. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, to see how the Knicks progress. Like you said, Randall, people forget, I think, how meaningful and good of a player that he really is. And I think the Knicks still value that. And, he very well may be the X factor for them. And like you said, I mean, his bench is loaded. This team is loaded. They've got great chemistry. The city is really, come behind them. I mean, New York has always been a Knicks town, I think, just because with the other sports, with baseball, with football, it's more of a divide. But there's no one that's really a Nets fan. I hate to say it, out of Brooklyn. So everyone in New York really loves the Knicks, and they come together for it, and it's cool to see. And I was at the Mets Yankees game when the news broke, and literally Aaron Judge just hit a grand slam. News broke, and everyone just starts chanting "Let's go Knicks." I mean, it was pretty cool to see. So I think the city's going to be on fire for this team. I mean, absolute. I know we talked about it on this podcast for a few years now about, do the Knicks have the pieces to win a championship? And I was always very tentative. And even this last year, I still do not think they do. And I do think this Bridges move, re-signing Anunoby, I do think this Knicks team can truly contend and win a championship. I think they finally put the pieces together. And I think this team is proven a lot of people wrong, I guess, including myself. And, I think it's very great, as good a time as there's ever been to be a Knicks fan. So love the move of Bridges. Obviously, like you said, sucks losing Hardenstein. And, if Mitch Robinson does go down, then it'll be interesting to see what they do at that position if they go small ball, like you said. But, I know Mitch was in some trade rumors. I think those are probably no longer I think those talks have subsided, because I don't know who else would be playing center for the New York Knicks. I guess Jericho Sims would be their next center. I don't even know. But
Exactly.
Yeah. So those 2 teams, Knicks and Sixers, obviously now, feels like them 2 and the Celtics are kind of those top 3 teams in the East. Obviously, you've got the Bucks with Giannis. You can't forget about Jimmy Butler, always lurking. The Magic, up and coming young team. Cleveland, if Donovan Mitchell's still there, could, maybe win a playoff series. So the East, fun time to be a fan of the Eastern Conference. I think, it's good to see that in the post-LeBron era, there's been a resurgence, you could say. Moving on, I mean, some other minor deals. Obviously, Klay Thompson seems like he is going to go elsewhere, I know there's a lot of hype around him, and obviously he's had a great career. At this point in his career, I just don't think he's going to be a good player, but I just don't think he's the difference for a team like the Lakers or the Clippers. Those teams, and maybe the Mavericks, just because I feel like they're a little more championship ready. But like the Lakers, I just don't feel like he's going to be the difference maker for them. I know a name that I saw floated around today was DeMar DeRozan. I think that's more of a piece that, I don't really know how that rotation will work. I guess you're playing LeBron at the 480 at the 5 and DeMar at the 3, but that to me is more of a piece that gets them closer to a championship than a Klay Thompson per se. But I think for the Mavericks it makes sense. I don't know. What are your thoughts on him quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are overthinking a little bit. Like Clay's still an awesome shooter. He's not a defender he once was, but like he has the smarts, he has the size. He's lost the athleticism like a decent amount for sure, but he's not going to be a disaster on defense. Like the Mavs, they really struggled with their open threes in the finals and even in the conference finals a little bit as well. So I think he would be an awesome addition for the Mavs as a role player. And I think he would give the Lakers something they need. But yeah, like you said, like he's not like a 35-minute a night, 20 points a game type guy he once was. But yeah, I mean, I think he's, I don't know. It's a lot of it depends on what Klay wants to be at this point. Like, does Klay just want to shoot?
So we got breaking news. Klay
Go ahead.
Thompson, 3 years, $50 million to the Mavericks. So it's
Wow.
done
Wow.
as part of a sign and trade.
Right. Okay.
So how about that? Three
Well,
years, 50 million. That's a little less than what I thought he was going to get, to be honest.
that's a little more than I thought he was going to get, to be honest.
Really?
Because I didn't think anyone was going to have real cap space to bring him in here, but I think the Mavs have a traded player exception from the Tim Hardaway Jr. salary dump they did with the Pistons a bit over a week ago. I don't know exactly what's going on with the Mavs salary space here because I don't know exactly how I think that's the only way they can afford this.
So we'll send Josh Green will be going to Charlotte. It looks like it's a multi-team trade. Looks like he had 4-year offers for more money, but he took less with the opportunity to win a championship. So LeBron gets said no to. Klay Thompson to the Dallas Mavericks. How about that? Live on Outside the Arena, some breaking news.
Heard it here first.
So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think, now that we don't have to talk about the Lakers, I think that's a good, strong move for Dallas. I think losing Derek Jones does kind of suck. He was a nice piece there. I thought he fit in well, but I mean, Derek Lively had a hell of a rookie year, and PJ Washington looks great there. So I think this team, I think that's the type of addition that propels them forward. And seeing Klay and Kyrie play together, that's gonna be pretty cool because it was Kyrie hit the game-winning shot or the shot in the
It
final.
was over Steph, but Klay was guarding
Okay,
the
right.
whole series.
Yeah. So it'll be cool to see those two together. Maybe I'm thinking of the one on Christmas. I think that's
That one was over Klay. Yes.
Yeah. So gonna be super interesting. Good move there. Chris Paul to the Spurs. I mean, I think that's a nice developmental piece from Wemby. Obviously, only a 1-year deal, but maybe they can make the playoffs. I don't know. Any other free agent moves that caught your eye before we move over to talking about the draft?
Yeah, I'd like the Mavs signed Najee Marshall, kind of an under the radar guy, but I think he's, almost can give you a lot of what PJ Washington does. And then they kind of Derek Jones, who was starting at the 3 for them. So I'd imagine that will be the flip-flop there. I think that's a good move. I like Derek Jones, but I kind of like Najee Marshall more in that role. So I think the Mavs will be really awesome next year. I also think there's some potential that Lively is just kind of an absolute stud. Like it's rare you see I talked about it before, but it's rare you see a rookie, freshman one and done guy who's a rookie and contributing to a finals team. So I mean, obviously there's something there, even if he doesn't get much better. He's a very good player. So they're very deep, they're complete. They also got Quentin Grimes from the Pistons, which I think is a solid. I think the Hartenstein deal to the Thunder, I'm kind of telling myself I'm overthinking it a little bit because I really like the fit in some ways, but I think 3 years is a little bit much for that price because, Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren will be I would have to assume we'll be getting max contracts in 2 years. So that first year where that happens and they're paying a max contract to those two plus SGA and then still playing Hartenstein, I think that could be tough financially for, OKC to foot. So I wonder what they're, because they're a prepared, one step ahead type organization. So obviously
They
they
might just trade him then. Who knows? They'll
maybe
throw like attached two of
three.
their
Yeah, exactly.
1,000 first round picks. And they're like, all right, whatever.
They also got Caruso for Giddey, absolute fleece. I am shocked they didn't give up any picks in that trade. So I think the Thunder will be very good, but I guess I would question how much is Hartenstein going to play in the playoffs, because I think they'll start him. He'll help with the rebounding. He's a passer. He can make plays with the ball in his hands, but their whole thing last year was kind of this 5-out system that allowed so much drive and kick potential. And it's like, I don't know exactly how he fits into that. I think it's better than, like a Clint Capella, who's just, no offense, complete disaster with the ball in his hands. Like, I don't think Hartenstein's like that, but, I think that will be something where it's like, they get into a tight playoff series, or they just playing Hartenstein like 18 minutes a game. That wouldn't shock me. And, that doesn't feel great for, someone you're paying that much money to, but ultimately, I like that move. They got better. Thunder are going to be really freaking awesome next year. The Magic kind of swoop in and sign Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to a big deal, but I mean, that's, again, I'm going to keep saying it. That's kind of the price of business for a good 3-and-D wing. The Nuggets kind of have really tried to like plan ahead, get some draft pick, get some young guys in the building. Christian Brown has been solid, and that's all fair. And I think, they've prepared pretty well to lose a KCP, but at the same time, you have their GM coming out like, around the draft saying like, we don't need KCP. And, the rumor is last night that they offered a similar amount, and KCP was like, why? Like, what? No, I'm not re-signing with the guy. Like, what? So I mean, I kind of think they fucked that one up a little bit. Not that they won't be fine, and I really do think you could put, basically a traffic cone at shooting guard for the Nuggets, and that starting five would still be pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I'm a little worried about that. I was just like a little bit like, what's going on there? I think, I mean, there hasn't been much else major that's really happened. I'll say this, Maxey, the fact that he both kind of let us just, string him along, not string him along, but he could have said, give me a max extension, at any point during the season. And the Sixers wouldn't have had the max cap space to bring in a Paul George. And then not only does he, do us the favor of waiting to help us bring in some talent, he also takes a 5-year max with no player option, which I don't know what Rich Paul was thinking to let him do that. But, because oftentimes this rookie scale max extension, it's a max, but it is nothing like the second and third maxes you receive, especially if you're on an all NBA team. So I think that's going to actually age pretty well as a contract for the Sixers. But truly, Maxey did really help the team out there by waiting and then not really kind of forcing their hand and playing hardball with them, which is kind of what I expected when I, kind of thought about it and remembered that Rich Paul is his agent and all that. But yeah, I mean, nothing else has happened. There will nothing major, I guess. There will be role players here and there, and probably some trades and whatever. But I think this is a good time of the year where it's like, okay, we kind of know what these teams are going to be like. But yeah, if you want to start going into the draft, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. So obviously, if there, any more big signings, trades, we'll cover them on future episodes. But yeah, we're going to recap the draft a little bit. Obviously, this year, considered a much weaker class, but I think it resulted in, a lot of some of these premier players in college, getting drafted that might not get drafted in a usual year per se. But, 3 of the first 6 picks in the draft from France, which I think is super interesting. And, I personally really don't know anything about any of those guys. Reece Shea, I like the guy looks like a bust to me, just like the face. I'm not trying to be rude, but like it's like I cannot picture that guy being like a superstar NBA player. And he probably will prove me wrong, and maybe him and Trey will be like the greatest thing in the Eastern Conference. But so obviously he goes number 1, Sarr goes number 2, Reed Shepherd goes 3, Castle 4. Some other notable picks: Klingon to the Blazers. Zach Edey goes in the top 10, which I want to touch on. I think that's interesting. Jared McCain to the Sixers. Dalton Connect to the Lakers. I mean, it was definitely interesting. I thought the Timberwolves might have won the first round, though, with Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. I mean, talk to me really about whatever you kind of want to touch on with the draft. But it was interesting to kind of see how the chips fell in a weird kind of year for the draft.
Yeah. So I guess in order, yeah, like you said with Reese Shea, like I think he'll be good. I don't think
Yeah.
he'll ever be someone where like this was a clear number one pick or anything like that. I don't even think he'll ever really be an all-star. But I guess it's fine for a Hawks team that I don't know what the hell they're doing, but I guess we'll kind of see. I guess they traded DeJounte Murray to the
Yeah.
Pelicans. Truthfully, I don't think that moves the needle for the Pelicans. I think DeJounte Murray has not been a good defender since he got to Atlanta, and he's not a good off-ball player. He's a decent shooter, but he's not like a Klay Thompson type where it's just like his shooting alone will provide a lot of value. So I don't like that move for the Pelicans very much. I think they're going to trade Brandon Ingram. My guess is he's going to go to the Kings. So I'm predicting we'll talk about that at some point, but that hasn't happened yet, obviously. So, we have to see what they do with that situation. They also have like no centers on their roster. So the Pelicans they're probably one of the more, we don't know what they're going to look like teams that is actually trying to win and has some very real talent on their team. Obviously so much of it comes down to Zion's health, which is just like, you don't know what it's going to be at this point. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have gone Reese Shea. I like Zaret too. I think he has a ton of potential. I think this is, the right type of move for the Wizards to make, although I didn't like them trading Avdia, but not a super big deal there. Yeah, Reed Shepherd, I think, is going to be awesome. I really like his fit with Amen Thompson, who's, a bigger, more athletic guard who maybe doesn't have the shot creation as a shooter at the very least right now. And Reed Shepherd is going to be like, all right, awesome. I'll take 8 threes a game and, get shots based off of you and Şengün and all these athletes we have. I think Shepherd's a perfect fit. And also a combination of being young, but I think pretty NBA ready. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, you wanted to talk about the Edey pick. I mean, honestly, I don't know what NBA front office evaluated him and saw a path to him working defensively in the pick and roll. Like, I think he's good at everything else. Like, I think he's, one of the 8 most skilled offensive centers in the league, especially, the post scoring, finishing, all that. He's obviously has the NBA body. He's NBA ready. He's going to help them with their rebounding a lot, but all that is really awesome until, you're playing the Mavs and, I think we all know where this is going, but, Luka says, give me that guy. And like, I don't think that's going to go well. We saw it with Gobert and it's like, everyone can clown on Gobert, but I think we all know that Gobert is actually a much better perimeter defender than most centers, especially Edey. And truthfully, I have nothing against Edey, but he's 7'6" and 300 pounds, and this is a team that wants to win next year. He's going to be relying on him as a starting center. It's like, I don't know. I mean, and I have a good friend who's a Grizzlies fan. I told him, I said, even if you get a Klingon who I'm very high on, like, I don't think you can rely on a rookie center to be playing such major minutes for a team that, I think is going to make the playoffs next year, almost certainly if Josh stays healthy. So I'm really concerned about that. And then, at the end of the lot, or sorry, right after the lottery ended, I think the Sixers got a good pick in McCain, who I think, again, kind of has that high floor as a good shooter, smart player, but then, also has some Brunson to his game where it's like he's a bigger guard, has a real knack for shot creation. He's a great pick and roll player, really appeared in the biggest moments last year at Duke. So I think there's some upside there. I would maybe be a tad bit lower on Connect than I am on McCain, but that guy's going to be a really good piece for the Lakers, like day one next year. The whole like joke on Twitter has been like, oh, JJ Redick's already drawing up plays for him. And it's like funny and whatever, but it's like, I think it's true. Like the Lakers haven't had a shooter like this in a really long time, the very least since that bubble championship. So I think he'll provide some real value there. I guess there's a question of like, is he ever going to be good enough defensively / just as an all-around player to be like a 35-minute a game guy? But like that doesn't, make it a bad pick if he's just a very good role player, which I think is kind of his floor. I just think sorry, I got distracted there for a second. Sorry. But the Lakers are in a spot where it's like, I think they're good. I just don't see a championship here, but I don't know exactly what I would do if I was them. Like, you could try to trade D'Lo, but I don't know what you're getting there. Like, does Trae Young help? I don't think so. Like, I don't know. You talked about DeRozan. Honestly, I think that would kind of be like a bit like Westbrook, because it's just a complete non-shooter, and that just makes the like LeBron ball handling, moments much more complicated. But talent-wise, obviously that's a big thing there. So I don't know exactly what their next move is, but I think they'll be good next year. Where else in the draft was interesting to you? I think one thing that interested me was the Pistons. I like Ron Holland. I think most people saw him more as like a later lottery guy. I thought he was, in a vacuum, a good pick at number 5, but I just don't know what the fuck the Pistons are doing here. Like, at some point you have to, I mean, first of all, it's not their fault that they've been number 1 in lottery odds the past 3 years and gotten the number 5 pick, which is, and obviously
awful.
the lottery odds, they're sent to prevent tanking, but if a team is bad, they kind of need some top picks to get their team back together. So a little back and forth on that. But I'm just kind of done with the Pistons being like, we don't have to worry about, our basketball team making any sense together, because draft picks are awesome, but developing your top draft picks is even more paramount. And I don't see the path to, Cade Cunningham becoming, what I really think he can become with no shooting. I mean, it's a joke, because, you have to play the young guys, but right now you have Asar Thompson, who shot like 16% from 3 last year or something. You have Jalen Duren, who I like, but he's not a shooter as a big. And Ron Holland isn't a shooter. And then even Jaden Ivey, who I think could develop as a shooter, he's not like, a connect type where it's like he's going to come in and be a great shooter. He hasn't been so far. So
Well, now they got Tobias Harris, so now they're
forgot
good.
about Tobias Harris. Yeah, Tobias will probably put up some pretty good numbers.
He's gonna get that check and throw up some shots and have a good
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, the Pistons. I'm almost done with the Pistons now, because this is making me angry, because I don't know what the hell they're doing. Although I do like Holland as a pick, like I said. I think clinging to the Blazers is an awesome pick. I know they have Ayton. Ayton sucks. I'm sorry. I'm done with Ayton. Kind of kind of done with a lot of the
You're
bad
just done, yeah. It's like
point.
feels like a breakup right now. Shit.
Yeah. But like you said, I really like Dillingham. And they also got Terrence Shannon, which I did forget about, but once he got cleared of the legal situation, I was like, oh yeah, this guy is a good wing, like day one. I feel like maybe he has a few, it's a bit tough for him to adjust to being like a role player as opposed to like the guy at Illinois, but that's most of these dudes. Dillingham, has a lot of potential as a creator, and all of that. I think it's perfect to get him behind Conley now, so he can kind of develop the more like, basketball IQ and just making the right basketball play part of his game. Not that he's like selfish or anything. I just think he's a 19-year-old who has a lot to learn in terms of winning NBA basketball games, which is completely fine, but he won't be relied upon. If they don't want to play him in the playoffs, they don't have to. They can certainly if he's good enough, but they have Conley. They can play Edwards at the point, or Alexander Walker some minutes at the point, whatever. They can figure it out. So I like that pick. I don't even know Tijan Salon. I didn't know who this guy was. I've heard, he's like a complete, moldable ball of clay, athlete, long body, whatever type prospect. I don't know. I guess I kind of, the reason I'm so upset with the Pistons is like I can rationalize what the Hornets are doing even. I can't rationalize what the Pistons are doing right now. I don't really get it. I don't see any direction there. Cody Williams, Jalen Williams' brother at the end of the lottery to the Jazz. Interesting, prospect developmental type piece for the Jazz. I like that. I think Devin Carter to the Kings at 13 could be a good impact, bigger guard who has some, shot creation, but also can help them out defensively. I think he might be a starter day one, if not a pretty real rotation piece. I think the Kel'el Ware pick by the Heat was interesting just because he's not like, your Heat culture type guy. Like he's actually had some character concerns. So I don't know exactly what, changed there or whatever, but I trust the Heat certainly. I'll say this, the Heat are definitely going to win like 50 something games next year because everyone has forgotten about the Heat, and that's always what the Heat do when people forget about them. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of prospects in this draft that I'm just, I'm not super familiar with. I'm not going to lie to you. I think a lot of these guys, picked in the back end of the first round won't be playing too much. I guess Collier will get some minutes for the Jazz, but like I go on a quick rant about the Bucks. I don't know what the Bucks plan is here. I mean, Doc Rivers, even if you like him as a coach, he really doesn't play young guys at all. That was like the first thing he did when he got to the Bucks last year was stop playing all the young guys. And the Bucks, with their very limited assets and draft picks, take like an 18-year-old who is not even going to crack the rotation in for 2 years at the very least. And, and Dame is aging, and Brooke Lopez and Chris Middleton are pretty old as well. Like this is a team that has to win now. This is a team that is pretty far away to me, but also is in a spot where I think they could at least have a chance. Could you have gotten a Caruso? Could you have gotten, someone else? I just think this team, if you got, sorry, 2 or 3 more really good, 3-and-D type players, like I think this team would be so much more serious. And I don't think they even tried to do that. So I'm a little frustrated with them. And then I guess my last thing would be, I don't really know. I expected the Cavs to make a move this offseason. Not that I think they've made a huge mistake in not making a move yet, or that they won't make a move. I expected that they would be very active this offseason. That hasn't been the case so far. So just interested to see where they go. Not that I'm necessarily, hate what they're doing.
No, I mean, the Cavs are like, I don't know. They're kind of in no man's land to where it's like, you could probably run it back, but it's like, you're going to see the same thing. So it's like, I agree. Like they need to either, I'm a big believer in either, I just hate the middle ground. Like either blow it up or like go all in and like switch things up. And I think they, maybe we're looking to trading Garland and that hasn't worked out. And, there's rumors about Jared Allen, like, maybe they traded Karis LeVert. Like, what do you do? How do you really make it better? Because they're devoting, so much salary to all these guys at this point. If they were obviously to blow it up and trade, Mitchell, Mobley, Allen, like they would recoup a ton of assets. So they're obviously, I think they're one of those teams where it's like, one of the teams that could potentially blow it up and it would probably have the most interest out of a lot of these teams. But going back to the draft, really like the Spurs pick of Stephon Castle. I think that's a great player to pair with Wemby. Also now, going to have Chris Paul with him, but big guard, great defensively. I mean, we saw it all throughout the NCAA tournament. Watching him against Northwestern, like Boo Buie, a guy who pretty much dominated, any guy on him throughout the entire season, really struggled. And I do think that speaks volumes to just how good this guy is. I mean, he did it to every player he faced throughout the tournament. So I thought that was a great pick. I was really excited when they picked Dillingham because I didn't know they had traded the pick, and I was like, oh my God, that is so fun having Castle and Dillingham together with Wemby. But obviously the Spurs have a plan in place. Like I mentioned, I like Dillingham a lot. I think he's got a lot of upside. Also is one of those prospects where he very well could, I think it's boom or bust with him. He could be, one of the bigger stars out of this draft, or he could be one of the bigger failures, I think. The Terrence Shannon pick, I mean, that guy plays so hard, and his ability to get down the court is just like something I've not seen from many people ever. So I think the Timberwolves going out and just having that explosiveness with those two really is fun with the pieces they already have there. Obviously, they're a team that, there's trade rumors all around, with their cap situation. Zach Edey, number 9. I think Zach Edey is going to be one of the most, maybe the most, probably Bronny James will get some
Yeah.
attention, obviously, but like he's not going to play. But like out of the guys who are going to play, I think Zach Edey to me is the one I'm most curious about, and I think will have generally a lot of attention, just because like I think people for the last few years have been like, this guy's not going to pan out in the NBA. He's not have what it takes. He's not a first rounder, and he goes top 10 in the lottery, and it seems like he's going to start in Memphis. It's going to be really interesting to see how he progresses. I think he's going to be, like you said, a solid scorer. Like defensively, there are some concerns, obviously, but you've got Jaren Jackson there next to him, which I think really helps because he won Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago now, or the last season. So having that guy right beside him, I think is going to be a huge boost for them. I'm excited to see how Edey plays. I think it's just fascinating. The Utah Jazz, you bring up Cody Williams. I thought they hit a home run with this draft. You get Williams, Isaiah Collier, who for a long time was, considered the number 1 player in this draft and fell all the way to 29.
He has way too much upside to have gone that late. I mean, I get why some of the, contending teams passed on him, but I mean, there's almost no way he doesn't well outperform that draft status to me.
Yeah. And obviously Kyle Filipowski, who, I mean, the reason they said this guy fell is an crazy story that I don't think we need to get into on this podcast. Look it up if you haven't already. I really am curious. I hope there's more details to come about this story because it is fascinating. I think it's one of the crazier draft stories I can remember. But he falls in the second round, and looking at him on the court, he's a great player as well. And, kind of a little bit reminds me of Lauri Markkanen. Obviously not, I think, his greatest scorer, but like maybe he's just tall and white, but like it's a similar build, similar type of like player. So I think the Jazz are really doing it right. I think those 3 guys, I mean, these NBA rosters, it's not like the NFL where you got like 50, 60 guys and they're like 3 guys. If you hit on even 2 of those guys, it makes such a difference. And I really, think that at least 2 of the 3 of these guys are going to be key parts of the future for them. So that's a home run for them. I really like Tyler Kolek to the Knicks as well. I think he's a guy who might not play right away, obviously, but he's kind of a facilitator type piece that I think really could fit in well with all the weapons they have there as someone who just is the floor general and also can score the basketball as well. So I liked that pickup from the Knicks. Bronny James, it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. I kind of feel bad for him almost. I know that that's where him and Rich Paul wanted him to go, but, he's just going to be in LeBron's shadow. I think, at this point, it's like, any hope he had of kind of making his own name, and obviously it's going to be tough when your name is LeBron James Jr., but like, I think at this point, it's like pretty much like unless he himself becomes like a stud, he's kind of just going to be stuck in his dad's shadow forever, which I don't know. It's kind of unfortunate, but that's what I thought. And lastly, the McCain Dalton Connect back to back. I like Jared McCain. I think, he's going to be a great scorer. One thing I remember is, watching the Duke game against, they lost to, who did they lose to in the end? They didn't lose to James Madison. No, who'd they lose? They lost to NC State.
That's correct. Yeah.
But I think it was that game. I forget the final score, but there was some game where they were down. I think it was that one. And he was just hustling up the court, trying to make threes, doing everything he can. Like, that's the type of player you want. Like, I think this guy wants to win so bad. He's got an incredible motor. Obviously seems like an incredible person just off the court in general, which I think is going to be so good. That Philly locker room obviously has a lot of veterans, but I think some youth like that is really sometimes what can make a difference. So I love that pick. He's going to be a great shooter, great player. It'll be interesting to see kind of his role and impact in the first year. And then Dalton Connect, like you said, obviously, I think the Lakers were shocked he fell to 17. I think it's incredible value at that pick. The Lakers really get a shooter that they need, and he's going to be someone who can make an impact on day one. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think both those picks were home runs for the Sixers and Lakers, and this draft is super interesting. I think I'm excited to see 5 years from now who we look back on, because obviously, like, this draft has gotten a lot of hate, but I really think a lot of these guys actually could be solid NBA players. The question is, are there any real how many stars will we get out of this draft? Because I think we're going to get a lot of solid role player type pieces, but how many stars and guys that can evolve to that? Obviously, time will tell. Anything else on the draft? Or, I mean, that's kind of all I got. So if you want to wrap it up too, that works for me.
Yeah, I'll just go quickly through the second round here. I don't even know because all these picks get traded and traded
Yeah.
and traded again. So I don't know exactly what teams some of these guys are on. But Juan Nunez to the Pacers at 36. I think he is actually on the Pacers. I
He's
really
on the
like
Spurs.
He's on the Spurs. Never mind. Actually, I really like that then. That'll be interesting because he's kind of, a bigger guard, has real playmaking chops, the defensive intensity and whatever that has to be worked on. But I really think offensively, this guy could really be a stud. I think the big thing you have to look at with these like big guards who don't shoot well is a lot of it is just like, do they finish well? Do they have good touch? Do they shoot well from the line? Because, if you can't finish well and you don't have good touch and you're not making your free throws, like, I don't think you're going to become a good shooter. But, you look at Juan Nunez, this guy, I think, hit like 86% of his free throws, has great touch indicators, all the things that suggest to me he has, the potential to be one of the best players in this class. Picked at 36 there. I think Oso Ighodaro went to the Suns at 40. He might freaking start for them, man. I mean, their center position is a mess. They signed Mason Plumlee. I think he's better than Nurkic as well. So I think that'll be interesting. I think the Suns, they have Budenholzer, who I really like as a coach, but I don't even know if he can work miracles on this team. They're kind of in a really bad spot here. AJ Mitchell to the Thunder at 38, I really liked as well. Kind of similar things to be said, as Juan Nunez, but he's American and played in college here. But I would, have a similar thought on him as a player. Quinton Post, big from Boston College, who can really shoot it and was a really good rim protector, moves his feet well. I know he's an older prospect, but like kind of tired of hearing that, if you're 21, but you have the potential to be good at everything, that you're a low upside or whatever, people say. Like, people said that about Jalen Williams, and I was like, why? He's like a 6'5" wing with a massive wingspan and a ton of athleticism, who played at a, lower level of competition. Like, of course he has upside. I don't care that he's like 20 and a half or whatever when he's drafted. Like, he has a ton of upside. And I think that could kind of be said about Quinton Post. Obviously, he might literally not make the team and, play in Europe for the rest of his life. So, that's also a possibility. I think Kevin McCullough went late to the Knicks as well. I think he could be good. Like you said, like Tibbs probably isn't going to play any of these rookies because they're deep and whatever. But in case, you have a Brunson injury or McBride injury or whatever it is, I think these guys actually could step in and play. Whether Tibbs trusts them or not, I guess, is a different question. And then finally, I want to talk about Bronny a little bit here, because here's the first thing I'll start with. I mean, how many times, I mainly follow the NBA and NFL draft. So, I'm sure you know more about the MLB draft, but I can't imagine this isn't the case there as well. I mean, how much of the late rounds of these drafts is, a highly touted prospect or someone who had a great freshman year or whatever, and then, something goes wrong at some point, or they never quite, live up to their potential or whatever it is. I mean, I think that is so much of the back end of these drafts. I mean, I just cannot believe I mean, it's obviously because it's LeBron's son and, there's some nepotism involved, and I'm not denying that, but I mean, let's be clear here. First of all, Austin Reeves, good player for the Lakers, was a projected, early mid-second round pick. And he said, don't draft me. I'm going to the Lakers. They guaranteed me, a real chance to make the team and have a role. I was a Lakers fan growing up, whatever. I think that was the case with Reeves. He made the choice and said, I don't want to be drafted. I want to go to this place where, the opportunity and whatever is good for me. I really have no problem with Bronny doing the same. So I really don't like that. And I'll say this about Bronny, I had friends being like, does this guy have any chance to be an NBA player? I'm like, yes. I mean, this guy was a McDonald's All-American in high school. Maybe it was because, maybe it was partial, but my point is there's no way this guy wasn't, a very good high school player coming out. He's 6'2", has great feel for the game, is unselfish, good passer, 6'8" or 6'9" wingspan, truly does have an NBA body. And again, I'll say this, it's like how much of a prospect's development comes down to, their willingness and ability to improve, the people around them, I mean, I don't want to call anyone out, but there are certainly guys who, they get to the league, they see, way more money than they've ever had in their life. And it doesn't, it's not as deep to them. And that's completely fine. But are we also going to pretend that Bronny's about as safe as a pick for that not to be the case with? I mean, like, he has one of the best agents in the world. He's training with his dad. Like his dad's going to keep him on the, the right path here. Like I hate to say it, but I really do think Bronny has the potential to develop into, maybe not Drew Holiday, but in that mold of like, he does everything well. He competes, he's physical. And I know he didn't shoot well, and I know he didn't play well at all in college, but I mean, he almost died less than a year ago.
Yeah.
I almost cannot believe how different it feels because, I mean, you look at, Tariq Woolen, obviously NFL player, completely different situation, but, he's a guy who he had all the physical traits in the world. Maybe that's not the case with Bronny, but he went to, I think, Toledo or something like that, or UTSA. So I don't exactly remember what school, but he wasn't obviously this, first round prospect, but he had the physical talent. The Seahawks took a chance on him in the 5th round, and he obviously had some untapped potential that he worked hard to get better at, and he became, a steal. That is so much of what drafting is in any sport. I mean, every single prospect has to get way better to become what you want them to become. So a lot of it is, taking a bet on who's going to get better, not on who's good right now. And all of this is to say that, I mean, obviously no one is ever going to come at people for, I mean, Anton Watson, you didn't hear anyone complaining about that pick at 54 because no one knows who that is or knows anything about his team because he's the late 2nd round pick in the NBA draft. That's just how the NBA draft goes. So, I mean, and then there's but the 4-year college player who isn't going to get to hear his special moment. You know what really annoys me? That every year the NBA removes a couple 2nd round picks for some bullshit tampering, violations that they don't even give those 2nd round picks to another team. I mean, that's if you're going to complain about, these kids who don't have their lifelong dream or whatever, and that's a fair thing to complain about. But if you're going to complain about that, then why is the NBA just allowed to just get rid of picks from their draft? And it doesn't make sense to me. It is complete hypocrisy. And obviously, I mean, this kid is like our age. I think he's like younger than us even. And, he didn't choose to be born, to the greatest, one of the greatest NBA players, one of the best athletes of all time. He didn't choose, I think this is just a kid who loves basketball and, and I'm going to say it, like, this is so cool. I'm sorry. This is really cool. Like, I wasn't around for it, but, Ken Griffey, the Ken Griffey family, like, that's awesome. I don't understand, like, are they going to, Bronny throws a lob to LeBron and, the Staples Center goes crazy. Like, it's not called
That'd be
Staples
crazy.
Center, but
I just don't think he's going to play.
I don't think he's going to play. No, you're right. You're right. I don't think he'll
Maybe
play.
The preseason.
But I just, yeah, I mean, ultimately, yes, it's a long shot for Bronny to become a good player. The Lakers are trying to win. They're not going to play him, 28 minutes a game just to make LeBron happy. But I just can't stand everything that's been going on. And I just truly do really feel bad for Bronny because this is really not in any way in his control.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think, it's like, it's just an interesting, like you said, like, obviously everything with him has been, expedited and is crazy because he's LeBron's son. Like, let's say Bronny James was like, some random kid and went to USC, had everything was the same. he would not have entered the NBA draft this year.
True.
Like, he would have been in college. He would have stayed in college, probably maybe transferred out since, Musselman came in. But like, he would have gone somewhere else. And like you said, like, he was a 4-star recruit out of college, all McDonald's All-American. Like, he's a good player. And I think obviously the heart, issue, I think really set him back, and that USC team as a whole really just did not live up to expectations, whatsoever. But you look at what he did at the combine, like, he looked really good there. I think he's going to be a good player, like you said. It's just going to take time. Like, he needs those developmental years. Like, we are not going to see, Bronny play probably in meaningful games with his dad. Like, that's just not going to happen at the end of the day. And that's fine. I think it's good for Bronny, because I think this craze about him was all about him getting drafted and, oh, actually going to Lakers. And like, now it's going to be like, I just don't see there any reason to be like, yeah, there'll be some coverage on like the first game and them going through like the layup line together and all that stuff. And, if he does get in a game, obviously it's going to be covered. But like, he's going to be a guy who's just kind of on the bench and developing for the next few years. And I think that's good. I think hopefully he'll kind of be out of the spotlight a little bit, at least, like, I think we've heard about him so much just because of people wanting to see him on the same team as LeBron. And now that's happened, after the initial kind of first few games, I think, the Bronny discussion and hype, not, hype maybe, but like all this talk about him, I think will die down. And I think that's good for him, because I think then he can just put his head down and get better. And like you said, like, I am interested to see kind of where he gets to in the league. I think, it's going to be at least probably 2 years before we see him potentially playing meaningful minutes. But I just looked, the guy is 2 days older than me, and I'm 19, turning 20 in October. Like, like, he is got a lot of time. He's still so young, and I agree with you with what you said. And I do feel bad, because I think all this attention for someone, like you said, that got picked 55th overall, like, every mock draft had the 55th pick on it, like, front page. Like, it was a lot. But look, that's what you get. And I'll be curious to see. Obviously, I'm not totally into him, but I think Bryce James, LeBron's other son, is like a pretty good player as well. I'm very curious, because I know Bronny, just because he's had the same name as LeBron, is kind of, and the firstborn son has gotten a lot of hype. I'll be very curious to see kind of the I don't know, whatever the deal is with Bryce coming out of high school and going into college,
He's like
maybe the draft.
6'7" already, I think.
He's big, yeah. He's a tall kid, so people are saying he could be even better than Bronny. But obviously, if LeBron's not around, maybe there won't be as much hype, and he's not named LeBron as well. So it's weird that Bronny is like, because it's just so like Bronny, but it's like the guy's name is LeBron James. Like, that's kind of crazy and awesome. But yeah, we're talking about Bronny for a lot. So if there's anything you want to add, go ahead. But that's all I got.
No, I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Like, will he be in the G League? Whatever. I think the only thing I'll say here is, like, I kind of thought, I forget exactly when this was, sort of, 5-7 years ago, whatever it was, LeVar Ball was all the talk. He's on First Take. He's yelling
That
at
was awesome.
Stephen
I
A.
miss those days, man. The LeVar Ball, Stephen A. Smith, like, that is all-time television. That was peak First Take when Max Kellerman was on there, and I miss those days.
No, I mean, absolutely. But, how quickly, you never hear about LeVar Ball anymore. And,
No. Yeah.
even the Ball brothers, who, obviously they both had their injury issues, and I don't even know what the fuck LiAngelo is up to, but
I
LaMelo
think he
and
just
Lonzo.
had a kid, or like, yeah.
Oh, really?
I saw some post the other day from him. Yeah.
But my point is like, LaMelo and Lonzo might be cooked, but LaMelo still has, certainly I think a huge NBA career ahead of him if he can stay healthy. And no one really talks about him the same way we did, even when he was like a freshman in high school. And that's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
I think, the first few games, I bet, the Lakers, they'll probably be playing, that opening night, one of those primetime games, and they're going to pan to Bronny like 8 times. And then, you're watching, by the time you're watching a game in December or whatever, like, no one is going to even remember he's on the team. And,
No.
honestly,
Yeah.
like that's probably the best thing for him right now. Obviously in terms of the fact that he probably isn't ready to be playing right now, but also it's just like you said, like we need to like temper the not even expectations because I don't think anyone has these huge expectations, but just temper the attention. It's not fair. I mean, like he's talked about, infinitely more than Risa, Shea, or Sar, or any of these top picks at the top end of the draft
I don't
because
think anyone knew Risa Shea until like a week of the draft.
he's an industry plant. I mean,
like what, like, like I had heard about Sar, but this Risa Shea guy, like all of a sudden, it's like the guy's going number one, and I'm like, who is he? Sorry, that was a sidebar.
no, I mean, yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say is like, I know he was, you look at, I forget this guy's name. First of all, this is another thing I've been saying is I'm just going to change my last name to Crapo and I'm going to go, eighth overall
Number
here.
one, yeah.
But the guy the Knicks picked, and I'm fluent in French and don't know how to pronounce this dude's name, Pacome Didier or something like that. This guy
Yeah.
was, I think, in the same league, and like he wasn't like playing on this team because it's like a professional basketball league. Obviously, like they're good players, whereas Risa Shea was like apparently like their best defender or whatever. I don't know how much I care about that. I remember, when Luka was coming out, I was like, this dude's the MVP of the EuroLeague at like 18. Like he's gonna be disgusting. That's not the case with Risa Shea. He's probably more
Yeah.
pro ready than, most, I bet he'll be better next year than, Tijan Salon and Pacome Didier, who might never see the court next year. But yeah, like you said, I don't know. I mean, I play a lot of, NBA 2K, they have those custom draft classes. I never saw him in those. I look at a lot of mock drafts. I don't think I saw this guy until like at least April. I mean, I don't know exactly
The
what
greatest
happened.
rise in NBA draft history.
But the thing,
From unknown to number one.
you look at all these guys who have him number one, and they're like, yeah, shades of Harrison Barnes, shades of Jaden McDaniels. I'm like, what? So certainly I have a lot to say
Shit.
about the Hawks. They kind of have just been like they just do nothing basically. They kind of just like let their team, kind of play it out. Like they were playing Trent Forrest last year, like every game as a rotational guard. He was on a two-way contract. They had an open roster spot. They weren't near the luxury tax, and they just like waited 4 weeks to convert it to an NBA contract for God knows what reason. They like AJ Griffin was very promising his rookie year, and they kind of just traded him away for like the 54th pick this year. So I have no idea what the hell they're doing. I hope Risa Shea works out. But like you said, this just seems like a disaster already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are more moves to come in the off season, but yeah, I think that's mostly it for today for what we know.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping, obviously MLB season's heating up. I think they just announced like a new home run derby format, which I
Yeah,
tried
they
to
did.
look into. I don't quite understand, but maybe that'll be cool. Yeah, I mean, MLB season obviously is heating up. We have the trade. What's the trade deadline about? Like month
It's like a month
month.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. Obviously baseball is a league where a ton seems to happen at the trade deadline because, it's all about your window, this guy's going or whatever. We don't have the payroll, all that stuff. So teams that are, I think the Guardians could go all in. I think the
Yeah.
Orioles could really say, are we going to be able to afford all these dudes? Let's try to win now. Obviously the Phillies, the Yankees are, your usual suspects. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, looking forward to more episodes and talking basketball, baseball. Football season is relatively soon, which
We're getting close. We're
I'm
getting
really
close.
excited for. Yeah, I think the Eagles are playing week 1 in Brazil, which I kind of forgot about, but that's going to be really
That's
awesome.
crazy. Did you see the Josh Jacobs like podcast where he was like talking about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not true. I think it's
I think
because
some of it's not true, but also like it wouldn't shock me if like they do have to take like tanks to the fucking game.
no, I'm sure they're being very cautious, but
Yeah.
I think it's because like the rival team of the team that plays there wears.
Yeah, it's something confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. But that will be interesting because I mean the only option I think is that the Eagles wear their all blacks and the Packers wear their all whites, which both of them do have green in those jerseys. I don't want to tell anyone that, but that'll be interesting to see. But also like I kind of love
They go
that.
all well. The Packers, do they even have non-green helmets? Or the Packers helmets are yellow? What am I saying?
They're yellow, but I think all of their jerseys have like a green stripe on the pants, and I think that's the case with the. I might be remembering this wrong, but
There's
I don't
gonna
know.
be some green in there, no matter
There's
what.
gotta be. I'd have to think.
Unless they were like pennies for the game.
It's like a practice. Oh my god.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting to see. But I think that's it for this episode, unless you have anything else.
No, that's good.
All right. Yeah, so we'll see everyone next week or whenever we upload next on Outside the
Next year.